We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
This morning, with the U.S. reporting another record day of deaths.
We are extraordinarily worried.
Experts say California is just beginning to see the surge from the Thanksgiving holiday, with hospitalizations rising 80%, some medical centers forced to turn people away.
We have an unthinkable number of COVID patients yet to come in the coming weeks.
Similar strains are happening in hospitals across the country. More than a third of Americans live in areas where hospitals are running critically short of ICU beds. With the U.S. reporting another record day of deaths, the highest positivity rate is in Idaho, where, like many other states, small hospitals are at a breaking point.
It becomes very scary. It becomes very difficult to handle.
Back in Central California, at least 3 counties have run out of beds in their intensive care units. Outside Los Angeles, some hospitals are running out of space.
We ended up making this our emergency department lobby.
This week, the ER, ICU, and COVID floors at the Regional Medical Center in San Jose filled up, at times exceeding capacity.
What we're seeing now is a sustained demand for a high number of acute care beds.
State health officials estimate 12 out of every 100 people who test positive will be hospitalized, leaving California struggling to care for its sick.
Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas. You know, I think saying Happy Hanukkah spreads COVID. Because in Hebrew, phlegm is a consonant, and I apologize for that. All of it. It's just hard to do. I mean, when you speak Hebrew, you sound either drunk or like you're hocking a loogie, because phlegm is part of the dialect, is what it is. But anyway, they had a giant Hanukkah party at the White House last night, and Donald Trump decided to take Hanukkah and turn it into sedition. I swear to God, that's what he's done. He has taken tradition and turned it into sedition. And he told them at this White House party that we, meaning him and his followers there, were going to win this election. And the people there cheered, without wearing any mask. And some of them were Hebrew speakers. Do you see the connection now? So he's got these people believing in total delusions. It's not just a super spreader event anymore. It's a stupor spreader event. He's putting people into a stupor about what the law allows in this country, what a democratic election is supposed to look like the one we just had, what agencies and states and recounts and inspections and audits show, which is no massive voter fraud at all. And he is literally telling people this unbelievable lie.
All I ask for is people with wisdom and with courage, that's all. Because if people, certain very important people, if they have wisdom and if they have courage, we're going to win this election in a lot of ways.
Holy crap, man. Holy crap. And it's not just about the number of people there without masks screaming 4 more years to a lying autocrat, to a demagogue, to a man who, the editorial pages of serious newspapers are now writing through their editorial boards, okay, through the whole board. They are writing editorials about how dangerous he is, and that violence will surely ensue, and that what he is doing is sedition. What he is doing is basically succession. He signed on to this ridiculous lawsuit claiming that Texas has some sort of standing to overturn the election of Wisconsin, of Georgia, of Michigan. I mean, what the? I thought Texas's motto was "Don't mess with Texas." You sure aren't messing with everybody else. What is that? What is that about? I swear to God, this is just dangerous. You know, and I understand why it's happening, okay? And I want you to understand why it's happening. The reason why Paxton files these crazy lawsuits, like the first one, to overturn the ACA, that's Texas, okay? That's Paxton. Paxton has been under indictment for 5 years. Since 2015, he has yet to stand trial. The charges are securities fraud, okay? And he is ingratiating himself to Donald Trump because that man is going to need a pardon, and he's also going to need a pardon from Greg Abbott, okay? Because the FBI is investigating him for abuse of his office. Tamara called yesterday, and she was telling you about an article she read that went through the nitty-gritty of the FBI investigation against Paxton, where he was helping a donor for the low bargain basement price. Man, these people are not only crackers, but they are cheap crackers. For the low bargain basement price of $25,000 for a donor, he was willing to, use his office to get employment for this guy's mistress. I mean, it's so sordid. It's so dirty. You know, it's hysterical. But now you've got all these other states that are joining Texas, all red states, okay? And they are suing purple states for turning blue. That is basically what we got going on here, because they're a bunch of crackers. And they're terrified of Trump's followers. They're scared of them because Trump's followers have been showing up at people's houses. They've been showing up at the offices. They've been armed. They've been threatening to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Now they're after the Attorney General, Dana Nessel of Michigan. You can't go outside with your kids if you're a state election supervisor. I mean, really? And so either they are joining because they don't want their house to be surrounded. They don't want their offices to be surrounded by crazy people who are watching propaganda channels, which ought to be illegal in this country. I'm not kidding. I'm so serious about this. You know, I've been testifying in front of Congress for years about how if you're going to brand yourself news, you have to meet some basic minimum standards of journalistic practices. You can't just throw up a news channel and propagandize the American people into believing that overthrowing the government is a good idea. And that is what's going on. Now, Rush Limbaugh's on the public airwaves. This should be low-hanging fruit. This should be easy pickings, okay? Because all it takes is an FCC complaint. Okay, that's all it takes. And people need to file those complaints. They need to do it because he's sitting on his show telling people this election was stolen, and he's not sure that secession is the answer yet. But he's going to let his audience know. He's going to let them know. Meanwhile, every other person in this world who has any moral compass, who has any legal education, who has been admitted to the bar of the Supreme Court, lawyers, like, Ted Cruz, they are shaming themselves and the bar by joining these attorneys general. They are shaming themselves. They are shaming the Bar Association. They are shaming the entire system of democracy by signing on to these false, recycled allegations where Texas is suing Georgia and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to nullify 20 million ballots. 20 million ballots.
Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randi Rhodes Show.
There's a civil war brewing in Georgia for no good reason. It's not unreasonable to ask the legislature to come back in and order an audit of the signatures in the presidential race to see if the system worked. What is unreasonable is to sit on your ass and do nothing when you got a chance to save the country.
The country doesn't need saving from the likes of a parasite like Lindsey Graham, okay? You remember before the election, I was getting some questions from people about voting, and the answer was from me to them, you're going to have to check with your state because there are 50 elections in this country. There is no federal election. Each state has a legislature, and each state makes the laws about voting in their respective state. Well, that has not changed. It is still the same. And what's going on here is that a bunch of frivolous lawsuits aimed at disenfranchising 20 million voters, large swaths of voters, undermining the legitimacy of this election, by the state of Texas, because they are crackers. That's what they are, freedom crackers. They are, they call themselves a lot of different things, but they are violent, and they're scared of the violence that they have incited, and they don't want it at their doorstep, and so they are joining in with this frivolous crap that has now been judged by state courts, state Supreme Courts, the Supreme Court, etc. And all of these claims lack proof, lack evidence, lack any credibility or any ability to succeed. And that's what makes a lawsuit frivolous. And all of these attorney generals that signed on to this ridiculous thing that Texas is doing should all be charged with sedition, each and every one of them, for aiding and abetting, if not actually participating in seditious acts aimed at the overthrowing of our democracy in the several states. I mean, this is just ridiculous. What Texas is doing is to ask the Supreme Court to reconsider a mass of baseless claims about problems with elections that have already been considered and rejected, not only by the Supreme Court, but other courts. It is exploiting the anger in this country and exploiting the courts. This is dangerous. The Washington Post editorial board wrote an op-ed today. The danger is growing that Trump's lies about the election will lead to violence. And everybody knows it.
I actually think, and I've referenced this, I've alluded to this a couple of times, because I've seen others allude to this. I actually think that we're trending toward secession. I see more and more people asking, what in the world do we have in common with the people who live in, say, New York? What is there that makes us believe that there is enough of us there to even have a chance at winning New York, especially if you're talking about votes? I see a lot of bloggers, I can't think of names right now, a lot of bloggers have written extensively about how distant and separated and how much more separated our culture is becoming politically, and that it can't go on this way. There cannot be a peaceful coexistence of two completely different theories of life, theories of government, theories of how we manage our affairs. We can't be in this dire a conflict without something giving somewhere along the way.
Huh.
And so I know that there is a sizable and growing sentiment for people who believe that that is where we're headed, whether we want to or not.
He is dangling violence and secession by force, is what he's dangling. And some people aren't being that careful about it, like Charlie Kirk and his counterpart on these particular weirdo shows.
You firmly believe, and I believe, that Trump actually won and that there's been massive fraud. Like, you believe that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
100%.
So, but that's the but okay. So let's just stop. But I'm saying, but let's just stop. So you believe that. So my attitude is like, so who cares what I can prove in the courts?
What?
This is right. This happened, and I'm just going to do anything I can to uncover this horror, this evil. The idea that somebody would, I mean, let's think, what could be the level of arrogance, brazenness, evil to steal? It's not stealing an election. It's like stealing the heart and soul of America. It's like holding a rusty knife to the throat of Lady Liberty. Like, that's what it is. It's
but
not some,
prove that's what it is.
Chicanery that happened.
You can't prove
and
chicanery.
They got away with it. This is evil. And you need to frame it that way. You need to say, ladies and gentlemen, it's like somebody is being raped or murdered, and you say, nah, that's, that just happens. And you're like, that just happens? What's wrong with you? Are you dead? You have no soul? You don't care about that? You don't feel justice must be done? This is that times 1,000.
How do you do justice outside of court?
This country has blessed unfathomable millions around the world in every kind of way, has spread liberty across the globe, around the globe. And I believe it's God's will that we would continue to do that at an increased level for a long time. So the idea that somebody would come in and do something like this, my attitude is just like, I don't care what we need to do. That is so unacceptable that if somebody says to me, well, the odds of you winning, I'd be like, you know what? I don't care about the odds. What's right is right. That is so wrong. We need to do absolutely everything we can. And what's going to happen is going to happen. But we need to fight to the death, to the last drop of blood, because it's worth it.
The last drop of blood. We need to fight to the death. I mean, these people are saying, I don't care if we could prove it. Rape and murder is what he's comparing it to, right? Those things go to court. They're criminal. They're violent, and they go to court to be adjudicated. You just don't point at somebody and say, that person is a murderer, that person is a rapist. You have to go to court and prove that that person is a murderer, that person is a rapist, and then justice can be done. They are saying out loud, I don't care if we can't prove it. This is like Nancy yesterday in Arkansas. I don't care that we can't prove it. I don't care that we have no evidence. This is actionable by us because we feel depressed that we lost. And now we want to kick some ass.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
There are now 17 states supporting a lawsuit filed by the state of Texas before the Supreme Court, asking the court to just straight up disenfranchise the voters of 4 other states because those voters didn't vote for who they wanted them to vote for.
Yep.
The suit is being spearheaded by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a man who fired whistleblowers in his office who came forward with allegations he did favors for a political donor and who has been under indictment for security fraud for 5 years ago. Oh! The Paxton suit is now backed by the President of the United States and 17 Republican attorneys general. Republican Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana has also emailed every single one of his Republican colleagues with the subject heading, time-sensitive request from President Trump asking them to sign on to an amicus brief too. Trump himself has now filed in support. Now, let me be clear. This suit has no chance in hell of winning.
None.
But it is as brazen an assault on the very nature of our union by elected officials as I have ever seen in my life.
Yep.
George Conway, an extremely prominent legal conservative, someone the Trump administration considered for Solicitor General, described it as crazy.
This is the most insane thing yet. It's
absurd and an embarrassment. And for a public official, let alone any lawyer, let alone any member of the Supreme Court bar, bring this lawsuit is atrocious.
All 4 states targeted by this absurd lawsuit are swing states that narrowly went for Biden.
Right.
Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Those states have to file their opposition to the suit with the Supreme Court by tomorrow afternoon.
That would be today, and the time that they had to file their response to Ken Paxton's, ridiculous, frivolous, unbelievably insurrectionist, seditious lawsuit was 3 o'clock this afternoon, and they have filed their response. I am going through them now, but I will tell you, so far I've skimmed, only been able to skim, because 3 o'clock was the response time, and that is when they responded. It is now 35 minutes after 3 o'clock Eastern time. And all I could tell you is that Pennsylvania so far has called this, I'll read it to you, a surreal alternate reality. Quote, Texas's effort to get this court to pick the next president has no basis in law or fact. The court should not abide this seditious abuse of the judicial process and should send a clear and unmistakable signal that such abuse must never be replicated. Nothing in the text, history, or structure of the Constitution supports Texas's view that it can dictate the manner in which 4 sister states run their elections. Texas suffered no harm because it dislikes the results in those elections. That was part of Pennsylvania's response. Michigan's response is pretty much the same. This is Michigan, what Texas is doing in this proceeding is to ask this court to reconsider a mass of baseless claims about problems with the election that have already been considered and rejected by this court and other courts. It attempts to exploit this court's sparingly used original jurisdiction to relitigate those matters, but Texas obviously lacks standing to bring such claims, which, in any event, are barred by laches. Do you know what the law of laches is? Laches means you can't wait. Laches is it's a legal way of saying too late. Okay, the rule of laches. And in this case, what it means is you can't wait to see how Georgia votes. You can't wait to see how Wisconsin votes. You can't wait to see how Pennsylvania votes or Michigan votes. And then when you don't like the result, after the election is held, object to the way that they had the election. You know why? Because the people of those states had every right to rely on their legislatures. And the legislature's choice in law that they passed and that a governor signed, setting in law the manner in which that state chooses its electors. And each of those states chose popular vote. Now, what's really, really sick is that Texas changed their voting laws right ahead of the election. Remember, you had Greg Abbott say, okay, so they want drop boxes all over the place. No. We're going to put one drop box in every county. That was a change. That was an act of voter suppression. And no one sued Texas for voter suppression. But here you have Texas trying to invalidate 20 million votes because they don't like the result. That's the law of laches. It says you cannot wait until the result and then make a claim because you don't like it. You don't like it. This was this is the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel yesterday.
I've never seen anything like this. I don't know that I've talked to anyone who has seen anything like this before. It is so incredibly outrageous. And I will say this directly to General Paxton, if he's watching. You know who voted for you in Michigan, General Paxton? No one.
No one.
Literally no one. So stay in your lane and, stick to trying to disenfranchise voters in your own state. Don't come to mine.
Right. Stick to disenfranchising voters in your state, because that's what they do in Texas. Texas is one of the hardest states to vote in. Now, you'll remember Georgia had active voter suppression too, right? And they're not suing over the voter suppression in Georgia. They're suing over the results in Georgia. There was voter suppression in Georgia that was easily seen by anybody who watched television. People waited 11 hours in Georgia to cast a ballot. Remember that? That's voter suppression. This is ridiculous, but it's also extremely dangerous. Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. Now, there are a couple senators like Cornyn and Mitt Romney that understand this is mass madness.
Well, one Texas senator agreed to present oral arguments on this case. The other senator does question its merits.
It's an extraordinary proceeding because you don't go to an ordinary court, you go directly to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I haven't really had the time to analyze it very much, but states handle their own election laws and voting, and you can make claims of constitutionality, in that state in lawsuits. But I've never seen it in something like this.
Senator Cornyn also told CNN, quote, "I frankly struggle to understand the legal theory of it." He could also say this is ridiculous and stupid and malpractice, and we need to worry about the coronavirus instead of make up fake lawsuits. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush tweeted, quote, "Thank you, Senator Cornyn. There is no legal theory, and the conservative majority Supreme Court will reject it out of hand." And here is the reaction from Senator Mitt Romney, who is more clear.
Madness.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Madness. It's just simply madness, which is the idea of supplanting the vote of the people with partisan legislators is so completely out of our national character that it's simply mad.
It's simply mad. It's madness. This is madness. This is mass madness, you maniacs. You! What have I been telling you for 4 years about this man? He is a liar who is determined to dismantle democracy with a small d because he wants to be an authoritarian dictator. Not even a benevolent one. Not even a benevolent dictator. He wants to be an authoritarian dictator. And what he has done today is file an incoherent, factually untethered, based on theories of a remedy that fundamentally misunderstand the electoral system in this country. This man is asking the Supreme Court of the United States to be loyal to him and to disregard the legally cast ballots of 20 million Americans. It is a retread of failed claims that failed in other courts. All that Texas did was put them in a defective, uglier package. These claims have no chance of survival because they cannot and have not and will never be proven because they didn't happen. People point to these propaganda channels. Oh, well, I saw a video of suitcases under a table. You freak, how do you think the ballots get from the polling place to the place where they count them? That is a normal process of transferring the ballots from one place to another. God, you people are so dumb and easily convinced that this country is a bad, bad place. How much do you have to hate your country in order to say these things? Good Lord, man. I swear to God, I don't understand. People are so completely disappointed in our system of government that they literally want to overthrow it, and some by force. Are you insane? We don't have enough death in this country. We're going to hit 300,000 dead bodies scattered around this country probably by Saturday. We're at 291,307 dead in this country. And people like Christie and Giuliani and Donald Trump and his entire freaking family, they have access to treatments that you don't get. They have access to these monoclonal antibody treatments that are so scarce that in states, for instance, like Colorado, in order to receive either the Regeneron monoclonal antibody treatment or the Eli Lilly monoclonal antibody treatment, you have to participate in a freaking lottery. That's how inept he is. He's murderous. He doesn't care about you. How much more death, really, how much more violent of a country will you finally be happy with? And these right-wing lunatics, should be drawn and quartered, you should use violence.
We're going to send that message to George Soros.
What?
Get out of our country, George Soros.
He's an American.
We are not going to allow ourselves to go back into the polling booth. And you hear us out, Governor Kemp. You hear me while you hide in your closet. And you hear us. You hear the people, Brad Raffensperger. And I want Lieutenant Governor Jeffrey Duncan to hear it too. And the guy that's making a ton of money, Gabriel Sterling, you listen up, Gabriel. You're not going to sell our votes to China.
Oh my God.
We're not going to vote on your damn machines made in China. We're going to vote on machines made in the USA.
These are some really sick freaks. Sick freaks. But remember, Lynn Wood, that's billable hours, baby. Somebody's paying this man to do this kind of ginning up of hostility, hatred, and lunacy. Okay? He's getting paid to do this. This is really sick, and this is really, really twisted. All right? And all these people that are on these various platforms telling you that you should hate your country, that it's okay to hate your country, and that you should overthrow your state government because they don't have any legal recourse, because none of these things that Donald Trump is alleging was criminal and rigged and illegal happened. None of these things happened. And they have no legal recourse, no legal option to do anything other than what they did. And that's certify the vote of the voters. Period. You got the majority leader in the Pennsylvania Senate. She told the New York Times that if she refused to cooperate with efforts to challenge the election result, quote, I would get my house bombed tonight. Bombed tonight. Are you freaking kidding me? These elections were run legitimately and without interference from China, Lynn, or any other foreign country. Maria in Arizona.
Hey, Randy, I love you bunches. I so agree with you, but I have 3 points. I want to get your opinion on them. I know you're busy. But the first one I'd like to bring up is, we had the truth doctrine. What the hell happened to it? I have no idea.
The truth doctrine?
However,
what is the truth? What is the truth? What is the truth doctrine?
Didn't we have a law where if you reported on something, it had to be true. You had to be able to prove it. And a few years back, Fox was being sued. And they turned around and said, well, we're really not news. We're entertainment. And that's how they got past it. And then all of a sudden, it just vanished. And so, I think if something along those lines should be brought back with some big penalties, that if you report on something, regardless whether you're social media, news outlets, internet, if you report on something, you better be able to prove it live right there and then. If not, you lose your license. You're done. You're gone. That's one of the things that I feel should happen. Secondly, you know what? These people who want to secede rather, give them Kentucky. Build a wall around it. They can stay in there. They don't get anything from the government. They can't have anything coming in. Nothing goes out.
Well, I think
they'll eat each other up.
Kentucky's too pretty.
Okay, well, you pick one. You pick one.
Mississippi.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
We'll give it to them. We'll build a wall around it because, Donald likes walls. So we'll put them all in there, build the walls. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. You live on your own. You try and survive. And if it's, who knows, 6 million people or more, or all of them who feel that, they got cheated, put them all in there. Let them, God forgive me, but let them starve for all I care. And lastly, for all these people who don't want to wear masks, when people are dying, I want them to get a stamp on their forehead with capital letters that say DNRAA. And it doesn't stand for do not resuscitate. It stands for do not rescue at all. Huh. I am done with these people.
Yeah,
I am done.
I get your aggravation, but these people are about 35% of our country, and I have told you a million times that 35% of our country can do real serious damage, and they're doing it.
Absolutely.
They're doing
Yes, and they're doing it, and it's criminal. And you know what? You want to act like a criminal. You don't want to care about your fellow American.
So that's the solution. That's the solution. The solution is to charge people who have signed on to this seditious act with what they've done, sedition.
Absolutely.
Now, I will tell you, most news organizations do not have licenses. I don't know what license you think they have, but they don't. But that said, we have courts, and the courts really need to act.
Mary had a little lamb. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind. The president has joined a lawsuit from the Attorney General of Texas, himself under federal investigation, to try to overturn the results of the election he lost. The president's filing with the Supreme Court states, quote, "Our country is deeply divided in ways that it arguably has not been since the election of 1860. So leave aside the circular logic of decrying division when he is the one stoking it, but that reference to the election of 1860. You know why the country was divided by that election? Because Abraham Lincoln won fairly. Enslaved states were pissed about that, and they seceded, and there was a civil war.
Right.
So by the reasoning of the president's crack legal team, Joe Biden is Abraham Lincoln here, the guy who won fairly.
Right.
And the president is the slave states, the ones who seceded, and then the Civil War. That's who Donald Trump is relating to this morning, as 3,000 new coronavirus deaths were reported overnight. He might stand at 6'3", but this is the act of a small president.
3,140. That's how many people died yesterday. And here we are at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with many hours to go in the day, believe it or not. And we're just around 2,000 deaths today. And the president couldn't care less. Couldn't give a rat's ass about all this carnage. This American carnage has all got to end. He is the cause of this American carnage. Again, we have courts, and courts need to adjudicate people who are asking for sedition, seditious acts to invalidate 20 million ballots while screaming about states' rights? That is why we have 50 different elections. States' rights. These things get adjudicated in the state courts. In the state Supreme Court is the last word, should be the last word, except for Bush v. Gore, which was an anomaly. It was bizarre. And the whole reason why the Supreme Court said that Bush v. Gore, the counting had to stop in Florida, was because of the Safe Harbor Day. And they were afraid that if we kept on counting, it would pass Safe Harbor Day. Now those same exact people are sitting on the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh worked on Bush v. Gore. Gorsuch worked on Bush v. Gore. Amy Coney Barrett worked on Bush v. Gore. And they are saying this ain't Bush v. Gore, okay? This is a immoral, extraordinary demand to invalidate 20 million ballots. And we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to have anything to do with it, okay? And here they are. And now, you know what you got now? 106, I swear to God, this is so crazy. 106 members of the Freedom Crackers of the House of Representatives, have just signed an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, to the Supreme Court, telling the Supreme Court, you have to nullify these ballots. You have to nullify the votes of 20 million people across 4 states. This is what we want to have happen. 106 House members. Now, remember, on January 6th, that is when Congress plays a role in this election, right? You know, next Monday, the electors will cast their ballots for whoever won in their state. That's how it works, right? We passed the Safe Harbor Day. Every single state in this union, every last state and territory, has certified the results. Certified the results. Every state, every territory. They're in. The next day of interest or note is Monday. Monday, December 14th, is the day the electors will actually cast their ballots. And then there's the all-important January 6th date. On that date, the House of Representatives and the Senate will have a joint session of Congress. It will be presided over by Mike Pence, the president of the Senate, and they will certify or vote to certify each slate of electors. Now, when you have 106 members of the House filing an amicus brief to the Supreme Court because they don't like the result of the election, remember, the laws that changed in Pennsylvania changed in 2019. They said nothing. They filed no complaint. No one did. Nobody. Absolutely no one thought that anything was wrong with what the legislature in Pennsylvania decided was the manner in which they would choose their electors for 2020. Now, ex post facto, after the fact, the election has been held. They don't like the results. The Republicans don't. And they go to court to overturn the will of the people. That's sedition right there, okay? But if you have 106 members of the House who are willing to file an amicus brief telling the Supreme Court that they want this election overturned, all that's missing to throw this country into a constitutional crisis is one senator agreeing with 106 members of the House in writing on January 6th, saying they don't accept the slate of electors from Michigan, they don't accept the slate of electors from Georgia, they don't accept the slate of electors from Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. You know what's fascinating about this Texas lawsuit? The person who argues for Texas in front of the Supreme Court is called the Solicitor General. You might know that because Ted Cruz was the Solicitor General for Texas at one point in his career. But on this Texas lawsuit, asking the Supreme Court to do an act of sedition to overthrow the right of the states to choose the manner in which they choose their electors after the fact because they don't like the result, the Solicitor General of Texas is absent. What? Yes, he does not have his name on any of these filings at all. This is all being done by a man who has been under indictment for 5 years, has never been called to trial, Ken Paxton. Okay? This is all being done by the Attorney General of Texas, who needs a freaking pardon. And not only has he been indicted for 5 years for securities fraud, but now he's under investigation by the FBI because 8 of his staffers went to the FBI saying he was accepting bribes and abusing his office, and he fired them. So they asked for and received whistleblower protection. He is doing this because he's in trouble with the law. And he is agitating for Americans to go do crimes, to go do violence against other Americans, to go do violence against people who did nothing but show up to count ballots as a public service, who did nothing but study election law, get a law degree, and become a supervisor of elections or become a secretary of state. And they're afraid to go home because they may see their house get bombed if they don't go along with the sedition. This is so twisted that the people who are breaking the law, the people who are breaking democracy, are screaming about law and order. It's Shakespearean. It's an O. Henry play. It's the height of irony. She cut her hair and sold it so she could buy him a watch chain, and he sold his watch to buy her a hair comb. I mean, it's just, this is bizarre world. This is unbelievable. This is amazing. The people who believe the strongest in states' rights and federalism are arguing in court that states' rights don't matter and to overturn the results in 4 states that they don't like the result in. I mean, and all after the election, all after it.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
This is not just about Donald Trump. If Donald Trump had never existed, we would still end up to where we are now. I think Donald Trump was an accelerator in that putting the blatant racism of the Republican Party front and center. But let's be very clear here. They have been orchestrating these policies to try to suppress minority voters for more than a decade now. And they have been operating under the belief that they need to pick their voters. They can allow the voters to pick their leaders because the demographics in this country have been changing. And we have seen with every election cycle that Black, Brown, Asian American, every demographic that isn't white is overwhelmingly going for Democrats. So Republicans, knowing that our demographics are changing, knowing that by 2035 that we are going to be a majority minority country, they need to pick their voters and do everything that they can to try to stop Black, brown people from showing up to vote, because they know that when they do vote, when it is a level playing field, when they have equal opportunity to let their voices be heard, they know that Republicans lose. And that was something that was always going to be the reality, regardless of whether Donald Trump existed or not. That's what they were going to try to do. And anyone who thought that after this election that somehow the Republican Party would wake up and see the light and stop being racist and stop championing these policies and stop propping up a feckless thug like Donald Trump, anyone who thought that was going to happen hasn't been paying attention to what was been going on this entire decade.
Okay, so he's talking about voter suppression, and not one single state has sued over voter suppression, okay? And there's tons of it. The idea that Texas changed its law right ahead of the election to one drop box for all of like Travis County, for all of Harris County. I mean, populations of millions of people, one drop box, right? There's been no lawsuit about voter suppression. The idea that they stopped the census because they wanted to continue to gerrymander the congressional districts, there's no law. I mean, the Supreme Court was asked to, whether or not you could stop the census, right? But that has nothing to do with all of these Republicans, all of them, 106 in the House, signing on to something that they preach from the top of their lungs every single day, states' rights. They don't want the states to have the right to choose the manner in which they select their electors. They don't want that because they see that it didn't go their way. You don't see them suing any state that engaged in voter suppression for voter suppression. You only see them, suing purple states that went blue. And they only filed a month after the election. A month after the election. This is an atrocity. This is neo-fascism in its rawest, most understandable, most visible, most immoral fashion. And you have to call it what it is. And the courts have got to say more than a sentence on this. I mean, there's no prayer. This is a hopeless case. Texas has no right to bring a lawsuit over election procedures in other states. That's a gimme, right? And recycling these unproven, discredited claims where other courts went through them point by point by point and discredited them, and putting them in an uglier package, but getting more people to sign on to it, doesn't solve their problem of this being a frivolous lawsuit, nor does it solve the problem of this being sedition, okay? It just doesn't. Now, what they're asking, just so you could be clear about what's going on in this case, the one that Donald Trump calls the big one, what they are asking the Supreme Court to weigh in on is delaying the electors from casting their ballots on Monday. That is the goal of this particular lawsuit, okay? They want to, disavow the votes of 20 million people and prevent the electors from casting their ballots on Monday. That is what this lawsuit is asking the Supreme Court to do. And of course, the Supreme Court is very familiar with Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution that says that Congress can choose the day that the electors meet to vote, but that it has to be uniform throughout the United States. That is what it says. So December 14th, this year, is the date prescribed for the electors to cast their ballots uniformly throughout the United States this year. And that is what they're asking to have happen, a delay, and we'll know the answer shortly. And Monday will probably come and go. And when Monday comes and goes and the electors in all these states have cast their ballots, then the next date that everybody has to be hyper alert to is January 6th. Because right now we know that there's going to be some sort of a floor fight on January 6th, at least by the Republicans in the House. There's one senator that I'm aware of, and that is what is required. What's required to challenge these slates in Congress to not certify is not just a single House member, and obviously they're going to have plenty of House members. Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Mo Brooks from Alabama. You're going to have a lot of them. Biggs, you're going to have a lot of them. But they need one senator to join them in writing to object. And right now, there's one senator who somehow compromised himself with Rudy Giuliani and Ukraine and going to Russia on the 4th of July, right? And his name is Ron Johnson, and he's from Wisconsin, same stomping grounds as Joe McCarthy in his day, right? And Ron Johnson hasn't said whether or not he will accept the results of this election. And all you need is one senator to join you in writing. And then the House has to adjourn. The joint session has to adjourn. They have to take 2 hours to debate it privately. Seriously. And then they can come back and they can vote. Now, if there's a split between the House and the Senate after they vote on whether or not to accept these electors, we think, because this is kind of unprecedented, we think that the original vote would count. And they wouldn't get to object anymore. But we don't know, because this president is willing to do anything, including violence. And so we have to sit here and wait now to see whether or not he gives a signal to his sycophants, whether or not he tweets something. Can you believe this? Whether or not he tweets something and says ratchet it up, or he says nothing, but they just get the idea that he wants them to do violence. And that's what we're sitting here wondering. That's what we're now. We've had electors challenged before, but it's never gone as far as a senator joining, right? And throwing it into, some sort of a debatable situation, let's say, or a votable situation. So all the responses are in now to the Texas case, and now we wait for Amy Coney Barrett.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
As the coronavirus continues to devastate this country, I am just finding it hard to hold my rage and my anguish together. We are watching a lack of action by the federal leadership of this country that feels almost criminal.
It is criminal.
It is depraved indifference at a level I cannot quite articulate.
Depraved heart murder.
Do you remember where you were on 9/11? I do. I think we all do. Well, I would say take a moment now to commit to memory where you are at this moment. We lost more Americans today than we lost in 9/11, an event that transformed our country and our government and the world. Today was just a Wednesday. We are now at a point where the nation's COVID response has descended into chaos. Just chaos, catastrophe, and calamity. And everyone is mad at everyone else. People are mad at each other. People are texting each other about the jerk at the store who wasn't wearing the mask properly and the person on Instagram who had a big party and big group on Thanksgiving, or the people mobilizing in this town or that to protest the restrictions meant to save lives, and the hypocritical local leaders and the governors who won't act, who are closing schools and playgrounds but not bars and gyms. All the while, a record number of people in the U.S. remain hospitalized with COVID. More than 3,000 deaths were recorded today for the first time ever. That's a record here and a record for the world.
A record for the world. We are doing the worst in the world because the president has a depraved heart. Death doesn't bother him as long as it's your death. Death doesn't move him. Loss of life or mass casualty events on American soil aren't anything he cares about. He only cares about himself and loyalty to his seditious desire to be the president for life. It is what he is about, and he needs to be about that, because if he doesn't have the protection of the presidency, he will die in jail. And it seems to me that Ken Paxton also needs a pardon from this president, also needs a pardon from his governor. It seems to me that Lindsey Graham is in trouble somehow. It seems to me that Ron Johnson is also in trouble somehow. And that it all dates back to Russia. It all goes back to the original sin of the Trump campaign of 2015. You have people that are ideologically against America serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. You have people who really want to see America fail, and they are elected to office by people who also agree with them. America must fail. They are disappointed. They are involved in a cult, and the idea of being part of it is all that's fun in their lives. It's all that's exciting in their lives. It's all that they live for, is to hate their country. They have no moral compass. They have no principles. They have no values. And we are really at, I don't even want to call it a crossroads, because that suggests something that naturally occurs in the landscape. This is a forced error. This is literally the desire of one man to overturn democracy in America, to make us fail. Now, if you don't believe that he wants us to fail or that he's rooting for failure, let me tell you that we have almost 2,000 deaths at 4:30 Eastern Time today alone. Yesterday we had 3,140, and he didn't say anything. Nothing. He had a Hanukkah party where he declared that he will be the winner. He will be the winner of an election he lost. The discontent in this country is obvious. 35% of America really hate it. They really do. They hate it. They don't understand it. They don't know how to change it. They're against change. It's really interesting. I mean, the things that would save them right now, stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, getting paid to stay home like other Western democracies do. I mean, all these countries that are beating back COVID, they do it by paying people to stay home. But you got people in this country that, while that would help them, you have a autocrat telling them, not for you. It's not for you. That's socialism. That's socialism. But redistributing the wealth from them to the rich isn't socialism, but it is. It's reverse socialism. It's taking from the middle class and giving to the wealthy. It's picking winners and losers. He does this with COVID too. Okay? When Rudy Giuliani gets sick, when Ben Carson, remember Ben Carson? He was so sick, he was almost dead. And he called Donald Trump and asked him, could you get me the monoclonal, antibody treatment? And Donald Trump signed off on Ben Carson getting it, and it turned his whole prognosis around. Same thing with Chris Christie. Chris Christie is obviously morbidly obese, and he has asthma. And he got COVID, but he also got the monoclonal antibodies. Picking winners and losers. It's what Donald Trump likes to do. It's where he believes he's the most powerful. And it's really twisted. So if you think he cares about you, yesterday we had an additional 200,000 new cases. Hospitals are overwhelmed in most of this country. And who are the winners of the pandemic? Big box stores. Big box stores. And have their employees benefited as the big box stores have quadrupled their profits in the middle of the pandemic? No. They don't even want to give hazard pay to their employees. It's all elite treatment. Elite treatment for COVID. Elite treatment for big business. Elite treatment for Donald Trump. He doesn't like the result of the election. Let the elite on the Supreme Court that he put there show their loyalty now. Be loyal to Donald Trump over democracy itself. We're in trouble. We're in a mess. And we knew the lame duck was going to be bad. We did. We knew it. when he refused to do anything about the pandemic. We knew we were going to have a dark, long, cold winter. But the fact that the Republican Party is now the party of Trump, and that they also hate their own country, and they've been elected to serve and swore an oath to the Constitution, unforgivable.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Distressing numbers. I think that's the key takeaway. A further 853,000 workers filing for first-time benefits in the past week alone. That's a 137,000 jump from the week before that perhaps was flattered by the Thanksgiving week. We've also got a jump in the number of people continuing to collect benefits here too. If I look at the states for the latest data that we have that are seeing the biggest rises, Illinois, Oregon, Colorado, Indiana, and they're talking about the hospitality sector being hit, the services sector being hit. And this is exactly what you'd expect, John, given the backdrop of rising cases and the worst point actually in the pandemic that we've seen. If you think about that five-day period at the beginning of December, we saw a jump in 1 million COVID cases just in the space of 5 days. So this is exactly what you would expect to see in terms of the number of people shedding jobs at this stage. In total, we did see a drop in the number of people collecting benefits to around 19 million people.
Oh, my God.
Your reference point here, though, is a year earlier, and that was 1.5 million people. It paints a picture of a jobs crisis in America right now, and why we need to see action from D.C.
And they won't do it. They won't do it because you have a Republican Senate, and Mitch McConnell doesn't feel like giving anybody any stimulus money or any relief in the middle of a mass casualty incident. I mean, that is what this is. So here's what, do you remember in 2008 when George Bush just literally deregulated the economy into oblivion, okay? And people lost their jobs, people lost their homes. The economic cliff that we went over in 2008, they called it a big recession. Some people called it a depression. And if you lost your house, I always say this, it was a depression for you. Well, during that period of time, we lost 800,000 jobs a month. And that was a tragedy, and that was a calamity, and that was an absolute disaster for the economy of the United States. Well, this month alone, we lost 853,000 jobs. This month alone. They were predicting we would lose a measly 730,000 jobs, but we lost 853,000 jobs. This is a move in the wrong direction. Millions of people will lose their benefits. I mean, we have almost 20 million people, you heard, 19 million people collecting some form of unemployment. Last year, 1.5, 19 million, and you have 12 million the day after Christmas who will be cut off completely. Cut off completely. And when you do that, the people who fuel the economy, us, who buy things, become unable. So millions losing benefits in the middle of a mass casualty event, in the middle of a virus, in the middle of a surge of a virus, kills consumer spending, which is what drives our GDP, which is the value of our economy, gross domestic product. 70% of GDP is us buying things. When you see 12 million people thrown off of any economic lifeline, people stop spending. That kicks off a cycle of less revenue for business and slow hiring overall. He is literally burning us down to the ground. Every single metric you could possibly look at, whether democracy can hold, whether we have a justice system that literally prosecutes seditious acts, whether or not we have an economy that can support its own people, whether or not we have, a meaningful solution to a pandemic. Mitch McConnell, you know what they did? They signed a continuing resolution. I kept telling you that I thought that that's what they were going to do. They weren't going to do anything on the stimulus, and they would just pass a continuing resolution with no money in it. And that is what happened. Now, it's only for 1 week. So next week, everybody, tune back in and see what the condition of our economy is and see what we can get to. This is a reality TV show for Donald Trump. This is a reality TV show for the Republican Party, who has become the party of Trump. $13 million Americans will lose their job benefits the day after Christmas. We have 10 million fewer jobs this year than we did last year. 19 million people are collecting unemployment. And this month alone, we lost 853,000 jobs. Some people died, right? 3,140 died yesterday. And today we'll see something along those lines too, because we're right at around 2,000 and it's only not even 5 o'clock and the day is not over. And all this man cares about is nullification of 20 million ballots. I mean, just comprehend that. Casey in Florida.
Hey, how you doing? Long time.
Hi.
Good. Happy holidays to you and the mister.
Thank you.
I know Hunter Biden has been cleared, or what do you call it? He's been investigated. I know Biden has been investigated for whether it's the Ukraine or whatever this conservative jello that the MAGAs want to throw up against the wall. They're desperate, and that's what they're clinging on to. But is there any remotely little legs at all in this case? Because if there is, this is really bad on the Democrats' part for running Biden. If they knew that Hunter had any sort of questionable, going forward.
Why? Why would it be bad? I mean, if Hunter Biden didn't pay his taxes, then he obviously will face the bar of justice. And that's what this is about. This is about taxes. So
I understand that, but the American people are tired of court dates. They're tired of impeachments. The American people, both sides, are tired.
Well, you
of
better
both
get
parties
untired. You better get untired because the Trump, organization is going to be tried for tax evasion, insurance fraud, for paying off mistresses, laundering money through law firms.
I hope so.
Okay,
I hope so.
So, and if Hunter Biden did something illegal with regard to his taxes, then you need to hope that the courts actually are equal in their punishment. Now,
but we had 20.
One of the things that could be going on is that the FBI is investigating Hunter Biden in order to clear him once and for all, so that when they do bring charges against Donald Trump for his tax evasion and for his tax fraud and for his insurance fraud and for all the stuff he did, that everybody will understand that Hunter Biden got a complete and thorough look-see, and that the system was fair. But if he broke the law, he broke the law.
But I understand that. But the thing is, though, is that the American people grow tired of both parties trying to crucify. Listen, I'm a proud independent that's always voted for the Democrats. You know who I am. But the problem is, though, is that the Democratic Party still needs to clean up their problems, too. That's the thing. This should have been a landslide victory against Trump, against the impeached president.
It
was
not. It was too. It was
not
a landslide victory in the Electoral College and in the popular vote. What more could you ask for?
No. Listen, Randy, it should have been a complete blowout.
It was a complete blowout. It was absolutely. Listen, they're challenging a state where Joe Biden won by 855,000 votes. Really? And they got you believing that this was close somehow? It was not close. It was a blowout. Now, if Hunter,
it was razor thin. It was
not
razor thin. It even
This is exactly the same margin in Michigan and Wisconsin that Donald Trump won by, and he said it was a landslide. It was a blowout when he won by the same exact margins in those two states. So What is this view of Democrats that, Democrats are, I don't know. We when we get a blowout, it isn't a blowout. I don't understand it. I don't understand it, but I will say people are just so disappointed right now. And you should be disappointed right now, but in the Republican Party. Because there is no Republican Party. They have vanished. They don't exist. They have no principles. They have no values. They have nothing. What are they for? Healthcare? Where's that? Infrastructure? What happened to that? Military money? He literally stole from the military budget to build his stupid wall. Stole from the military. I mean, really, what do they stand for? What do they have? Are they honest? Are they more honest? Are they more dedicated to life? Don't you? Okay, we just passed 2,000 deaths for today, and the day isn't over. They are not pro-life. They're pro-death.
How does the fault? We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
It's Friday, you bastards.
FBI agents have issued at least one federal subpoena for records from the Texas Attorney General's office in an ongoing investigation into allegations against Attorney General Ken Paxton here in the state of Texas. Sources confirmed to senior reporter Tony Plahetsky that the requests for information were issued Wednesday at the agency's headquarters on West 14th Street. Tony joins us now live from our newsroom with more. Tony.
And Brian, it is unclear how many of those subpoenas were issued or what information those federal agents are looking for. The investigation started after top Paxton aides alleged to the FBI in early October that they believe Paxton may be committing crimes that include abuse of office and bribery in his dealings with Austin investor Nate Paul. The group claimed that Paxton took a number of steps to benefit Paul. Paul's offices were raided by the FBI last year. Those steps included hiring an outside investigator to investigate Paul's assertion that the FBI violated his constitutional rights during the raid. Paxton denies any wrongdoing. In recent weeks, FBI agents have been questioning people who may have information about Paxton's relationship with Paul, but the FBI, we should point out, has not publicly confirmed any investigation.
Right.
Today, a spokeswoman for the FBI said she could not comment, and a spokesman for the Attorney General's office did not return our calls. Earlier today, Paxton was in Washington, D.C. He joined about a dozen other AGs from across the nation in a meeting with President Trump on a variety of topics.
Oh, okay. So we have some forward movement in the, in the discovery of the motivation that Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, has to put in front of the court a bunch of frivolous, lying, ridiculously twisted arguments to overturn 20 million people's votes. 20 million people's votes. To overturn the will of the people, or to get involved in a seditious conspiracy. A seditious conspiracy. That is what we have here. So now what we know is the motive. Okay, the motive to literally betray your country in service to Donald Trump, who is an autocratic dictator and wants to be president for life. We knew that Ken Paxton was in legal trouble. We also knew that Ken Paxton was doing just about anything that Donald Trump wanted him to do, including filing the bogus lawsuit against the ACA and combating voting rights in the state of Texas. You know, his crusade to suppress Texas voters is kind of legendary. It's kind of mesmerizing. This man, Ken Paxton, tried to prevent young people in Texas from voting by mail. He then threatened to prosecute Texans who voted absentee due to fear of COVID-19. Then he prevented counties in Texas from sending absentee ballot applications to all registered voters, and he prohibited the county, any county, from offering more than one ballot drop box, which we know he was successful in doing, but he unsuccessfully sought to ban drive-through voting. We know that there was a split between him and Governor Abbott, right? And we couldn't figure out what the hell was going on in Texas. Well, now we can. Now we know that no state official did more than Ken Paxton to restrict voting, to restrict the franchise, okay? It is not surprising that he is asking the Supreme Court to throw out the election in its entirety now. But we didn't really have a motive. We knew that he was under investigation for various things. And we also knew that Ken Paxton has been under indictment for securities fraud. We'll explain. Since 2015, but that there was never a trial. Why wasn't there a trial in 5 years? And how could he be attorney general while he's under indictment? Well, it looks like this man has a very long history of legal trouble. And part of it is this. In 2015, a Texas grand jury actually indicted him. They indicted him on charges of felony securities fraud. He allegedly, and we can only say allegedly at this point because there's been no trial, but now we know why there's been no trial. But here's the crime. He asked his friends to buy shares in a company without disclosing that he was getting secret commissions for selling those shares from that company. And he's not a securities broker, but he was receiving commissions as if he were secretly and on the sly. So he paid a fine for doing that, but he's under indictment to this day for doing that. It's a criminal offense, okay? Now, the reason why it's never gone to trial seems to be because he was able to get his friends in government, in Texas government, to literally defund the prosecution. His own prosecution, he was able to defund it by appealing to his friends in government to defund a prosecution against him. His wife, Ken Paxton's wife, he also has mistress, but the wife is a state senator. She also filed legislation that would allow what he did to become a legal enterprise. But it wasn't legal. It isn't legal to this day, and he is under indictment for doing a criminal thing. So when he realized he was under indictment for the criminal thing, he decided he would defund his prosecution, and he was successful in defunding it. All right. What is this FBI raid about? Well, this fall, there were several, like 8 whistleblowers from Ken Paxton's own office, senior officials in his office. On October 1st, 7 of these senior staff members went to law enforcement and asked that they investigate Ken Paxton for, quote, violating federal and or state law, including prohibitions related to improper influence, abuse of office, bribery, and other criminal offenses. They were led by a really crazy dude. Okay, I got to say, they're all crazy there. I mean, this is like the GOP eating its own, is really what it is. The group was led by a guy named Jeff Mateer. He was the top aide to Paxton, and he has since resigned. Here's his GOP bona fides, the top whistleblower against Paxton, just to give you a clue about how dirty Paxton actually is. Mateer, in 2017, was nominated to the federal bench by Donald Trump. A top aide in Paxton's office was nominated to the federal bench by Donald Trump. He had to withdraw his name from consideration because CNN reported that he had said that transgender children were part of Satan's plan. You may remember his testimony. He said that transgender children are part of Satan's plan. Same-sex marriage is debauchery and is an endorser of conversion therapy. He's the whistleblower against Paxton. He filed for whistleblower protection. Then 6 others in Paxton's office also filed for whistleblower protection. And in a leaked text message, the news learned that the complaints involved a relationship he had with a bankrupt real estate developer named Nate Paul, who donated $25,000 to Paxton's 2018. Now, it gets a little dirty. It gets a little dirtier, you know, if you're sexually confined.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
President Trump met behind closed doors Thursday with several Republican state attorneys general. The White House insists the meeting was pre-planned, even though all but 2 of the officials are backing a lawsuit brought by Texas AG Ken Paxton this week to invalidate the election results in 4 battleground states.
To nullify the votes of 20 million people. It's just, and we may have a rejection or an acceptance by the Supreme Court today. I have my eye open. The responses have been filed by all of these states. 20 other states have joined in asking the Supreme Court to please just kick this to the curb and get this done. But Ken Paxton was literally in Donald Trump's orifice yesterday. And I mean that. He was in his orifice yesterday, and he was probably begging for some sort of a pardon. Because here's the dirty little deal. This is how it started, okay? Ken Paxton was having an affair. He was having an affair with an aide to a GOP state legislator, okay? And he acknowledged that he was having an affair, right? He said that he was having an affair with a state senator while his wife was also a state senator. But he then encouraged Paul, this guy, this failed real estate developer, to hire his mistress. What could go wrong? Now, while Paxton has said, yes, I cheated on my wife, but of course he's, holier than thou, right? Do they obey any of the commandments on any day ever, or are they very busy breaking all of them twice a day, every day? I don't know. Anyway, so this guy, Nate Paul, hired his mistress. Now, Nate Paul denies that he hired the mistress as a favor or, that Paxton had asked him to do it. They just all know the same people. Okay, that's what we're supposed to believe. Anyway, Mr. Paul went bankrupt. Okay, he went bankrupt and it led to lots of legal disputes. He was stiffing his creditors. Sound familiar? He was stiffing all his creditors, and one of the creditors was a foundation, a nonprofit foundation that gives grants and scholarships to low-income students. The foundation invested with Nate Paul, and then they were forced to sue him because he concealed the bad financial information. So Nate Paul turned around and said, I'll buy you out, and gave them $10.5 million to settle a lawsuit, and then refused to pay. Sounds like a great guy. And when he refused to pay, he needed help. So he went to Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, and he said, stop the case. You stopped your case, stop my case. And that's what he did. He used his office to stop the case for Nate Paul, a bankrupt real estate dude who stiffed a charitable foundation. And then once the charitable foundation sued him, he agreed to a settlement and refused to pay the settlement. and then turned to his friend, the Attorney General of Texas, and asked him to put a stop to the case. And that is exactly what Paxton did. And after he was able to stop the case, just like he was able to stop his own case by defunding the prosecution for his own securities fraud, he did it for his friend who hired his mistress. And shortly after that, he got a $25,000 donation to his reelect campaign in 2018. That is when the people in his office, this crazy dude, Jeff Mateer, this seriously big hater, okay, who worked for Ken Paxton, filed a whistleblower complaint. On November 17th, the Associated Press had reported that the FBI was now investigating Ken Paxton alongside of Nate Paul, saying that he abused his office to help Nate Paul get out of legal trouble with this not-for-profit. That now is a federal bribery and corruption case. And on Wednesday, the FBI issued subpoenas for Ken Paxton's papers, and now he has no power to defund the prosecutors. But instead, he's undermining the credibility of the FBI itself. Now, what's interesting about this is this could not have happened without a sign-off from the Department of Justice, meaning Bill Barr. And so that is why Ken Paxton is so eager to commit sedition. To overturn the will of the American people in a free and fair election that was free of fraud, right? After he engaged in massive voter suppression in his state to try to deprive his voters of the ability to vote or drop off their ballots at a drop box or vote absentee, because he just knew that the more people that showed up, the more likely it would be that Trump loses. So he engaged in massive voter suppression, and nobody has sued him for massive voter suppression. You know, this is so unbelievable. So I would suggest that if there's any chance that the Supreme Court today says, all right, let's hear it just to clear the air or to give people assurances that this wasn't for, if they do anything except a very terse one-sentence rejection today, right, then I would suggest New York sue Texas. Do you know what I'm saying? New York or Massachusetts or, file a counterclaim Wisconsin, file a counterclaim Pennsylvania, and accuse Texas of what they did for real, and that's voter suppression, okay? Go ahead and file a countersuit saying that they tried to subvert the rule of law and replace it with the rule of Ken Paxton, who is under indictment and is still serving as the Attorney General of Texas, okay? Do it all over the country. I mean, if this is the way we're going to play, then let's play. New York, let's sue South Carolina. Let's sue South Carolina and say Lindsey Graham only won re-election through massive voter fraud. Let's sue Kentucky and say Mitch McConnell is there is no way that Kentuckians with, they're like last in education, last in healthcare, last in, average median income, whatever. Sue them and say Mitch McConnell only won through fraud, right? And let's just do this thing. No, we don't do this thing, okay? We don't do it. The only reason why you have Ken Paxton doing it is because Ken Paxton has a motive to do it. Ken Paxton will go to jail, just like Donald Trump will go to jail. Now, the rest of the Republicans who, you got almost 64% of the House Republicans as of this minute signing on to an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, saying they want the Supreme Court to overturn elections that they were elected in. All right, let's have a look-see at that little situation. So you now have House members who were reelected in this same election that they claim was fraudulent. They should be prohibited from taking the oath of office when the next House convenes because they were elected through fraud, right?
To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
After a very, very, very long list of norm-busting, democracy-eroding, generally cruel policies on the Trump administration, I gotta say, I found the lawsuit, now supported by nearly 20 states, that asks the Supreme Court to throw out the votes of the voters in 4 other states, as unnerving as almost anything I have covered, ever, including during this presidency. And that's despite the unlikely chance of it working. Today, the president met with a group of Republican attorneys general who are supporting this frankly undemocratic authoritarian effort by the White House. And they did it at the White House, while 106 Republican House members, more than half of the Republicans in the caucus, and every single one elected or reelected by voters last month, signed a brief supporting the petition to overrule the votes of millions of voters, to overturn the election result, to install the loser in power, destroy American popular sovereignty, and plunge the country immediately into the worst existential crisis since secession.
Seriously, dude, that is where we are. And, you know, the Democrats have had just about enough of this. I will tell you that the member of the House from New Jersey named Bill Pascrell, you may know him, he is now demanding, and he's right to demand this, that the 126 members now of the Republican caucus in the House who have signed on to this seditious conspiracy, okay, that they not be permitted to be seated in the new Congress. First of all, they were elected on the same ballot that Donald Trump was elected on. And if you're going to throw out 20 million votes, then you have to throw out all their votes too. Second, anybody, this is his statement, men and women who would act to tear the United States government apart cannot serve as members of the Congress. Do you agree? I agree. Any member who refuses the will of the people through lawful elections, and this was a lawful election free of fraud, should not be allowed to be sworn in because their oath requires that they uphold the Constitution and the laws of this nation. And they cannot do that with a straight face. His statement continues, these lawsuits seeking to obliterate public confidence in our democratic system by invalidating the clear result of the 2020 presidential election undoubtedly attack the text and the spirit of the Constitution which each member swears to support and defend. Consequently, I call on you to exercise the power of your offices to evaluate steps you can take to address these constitutional violations. This Congress, if possible, refuse to seat in the 117th Congress any members elect seeking to make Donald Trump an unelected dictator. It's a tweet. That's why I'm reading it off my computer. I wholeheartedly agree, and I also think that every state that is being sued needs to file a counterclaim against Texas, saying that their attorney general is under indictment, that the FBI has just issued subpoenas for the attorney general's papers and things because the attorney general is allegedly abusing his office and continues to abuse his office, and that there are 8 whistleblowers in his office who are just wackadoodles, but they're there and they sought whistleblower protection in order to blow the whistle on Ken Paxton's unlawful behavior using his office as Attorney General of Texas. Vote nullification. This is what they're all about here. This is crazy. This is, and you know what? Nick Ackerman, he thinks like me. Okay, he really does. Nick Ackerman is a really good attorney, federal attorney. And he's actually said what I've been saying forever, that this is racketeering. This is a conspiracy but it's a conspiracy to commit sedition.
They crossed the line. I mean, clearly the lawyers didn't go in and argue issues. They didn't go in and argue a case that was based on fact. They went in and just spewed falsehoods. And they're doing it before the Supreme Court now. I mean, you take one of the worst examples is they're trying to say that there was some kind of fraud because on election night, Trump was winning, and then afterwards he suddenly lost. When in fact, Donald Trump had purposely gotten the legislatures in both Michigan and Pennsylvania to make the law so that you could not count absentee ballots prior to Election Day. So, of course, that was going to happen. But that was a premeditated plot that was orchestrated by Donald Trump from the White House purposely for that reason, to make it appear that somehow these votes came out of nowhere. I mean, that really borders...
Before I bring Paul in, what kind of sanction and against who would you want to pursue here?
I would pursue sanctions against the lawyers. I'd pursue sanctions against the client, Donald Trump. They should be paying for the court time, paying for the other lawyers, and I'd look for criminal sanctions. I mean, I think if you take this right back to what the whole goal here was, which was to keep Joe Biden from becoming president, they are involved in bribery extortion with President Zelensky that carried right in through a premeditated plan to steal the election from Joe Biden. That was the goal of their entire scheme. And I think there's probably a viable racketeering count that could be brought against the people involved, including Donald Trump.
Yes, that is what's going on here. It's a racketeering operation. It is a RICO violation and the violation is against the United States of America. It's against the Constitution, which makes it sedition. And since you have all these people who are willing to not uphold the law of the United States of America to the default of, to the benefit of Donald Trump, to violate the law and argue bullcrap in front of the Supreme Court of the United States to prevent or hinder or delay the execution of the election laws in these United States, they are involved in a conspiracy to commit sedition. And the Trump administration is a racketeering, influenced, corrupt, for lack of a better word, company. No, you cannot let this happen, this kind of thing happen in these United States. I have talked to more crazy people in my personal life, and I swear to God, they believe that it was stolen. They believe Donald Trump is, the president. They believe that something, happened in Michigan, something happened in Pennsylvania, something happened in Georgia, something happened in Wisconsin that was illegal, and there is no evidence. But they believe it because the president is saying it.
Brutality. This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, if you're following this Supreme Court case, then you obviously are following an election attorney named Mark Elias. Mark Elias has been doing yeoman's work answering all of these complaints in the states, all right? And he is finally giving interviews now with just, 40 days until January 20th, explaining why this is so disgusting, just exactly what this is, that this is an attempted coup, and that's what we are watching. And there's no question that the President of the United States is trying to nullify the votes of 20 million Americans by going to the Supreme Court with this utter nonsense, backed by people with obvious motivation to do his bidding, to do it. So here's Mark Elias.
You tweeted earlier that you were shaken by this Supreme Court lawsuit. Why'd you say that?
Yeah, so let me start by saying I'm not shaken because I think it has any chance of success.
Right.
This lawsuit's going to fail.
just like all the other lawsuits that failed. So I'm not worried about that. What shook me was that, when Texas filed this case, it was kind of like, all right, Paxton is aiming for a pardon or is doing some sort of wacky thing, but this is not going anywhere. But then to see all of these states sign on and 100+ members of Congress, Republicans, sign on and support this shook me, because what it speaks to is an erosion of our democracy going forward. I mean, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be sworn in, but it speaks to an erosion of our democracy going forward, that Trumpism and its corrosive effect on democracy and democratic norms has now so thoroughly infected the Republican Party that 18 attorneys general used official resources of states to endorse this cockamamie theory, and that 103 members of Congress, many of whom were elected in these states, signed on to this. So that's what shook me.
Yeah, it's shaking. It will shake you to your core if you're a patriot. It will shake you to your core if you actually, believe in things like the Constitution, American democracy with a small d, free and fair elections, if you believe in those things, then it shakes you to the core that you have this many members of the GOP engaged in a seditious act, engaged in a coup, an actually attempted coup to put the loser of the last election into power yet again, and that they don't have any hypocrisy or shame or any reaction to the fact that they were on those ballots too, and that they think that they should be sworn in the 117th Congress, even though they're alleging that their own elections were fraudulent. I mean, it's so easily seen as a scam.
It's worth pointing out, I think there's about 12 to 14 Republican members from the 4 states whose votes they are asking to throw out.
Right.
Who were elected by those voters and those votes.
Right.
Yeah, and look, I was very public when Mike Kelly brought his lawsuit in Pennsylvania, trying a congressman to throw out the votes there. I questioned whether or not Mike Kelly should be sworn in as part of the new Congress, because if he doesn't think his election was legitimate and thinks it should be thrown out, then I think the House Administration Committee should look at that prior to him being sworn in. And I at the time, that seemed like an outlier position for one member of Congress to take. But boy, to see 103 members of Congress take this position and a dozen from these states, there is something fundamentally wrong with the Republican Party.
There is no Republican Party. There is no Republican Party. There's only there's only Trumpism, which is autocratic dictatorship. It's fascism. There is no Republican Party. Period. Nicholas in New Mexico.
Incredible Mexico, Randy. How are you?
Hi.
Been a very long time since I've spoken with you. I never have time anymore. I mod over at Tom Hartman, and that kills my whole day. Yeah, you know how that can be.
Yes.
First of all, real quick, how are you doing? Do you ever get down to CR anymore? Do you have time?
No. First of all, they wouldn't let people from Florida in at all.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah. So, and now you can go, but you have to have a COVID test, older than 48 hours, and you have to have international travel insurance in case you're hospitalized there, because they have socialized medicine, and they're not paying for us. So
yeah, nor should they probably,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Well, I don't want to waste your time here. I'm going to try to go fast. Did you by any chance catch the article yesterday in the New York Times by what's his name, Thomas Edsall, the resentment that never sleeps?
No.
Did you catch that?
No, I missed it.
Oh my God. Try to catch it if you can. The resentment that never. It explains why so many people. Let's start with extremely poor people, disenfranchised. People out of the loop, no opportunities. Why so many go to the far, far left, and others go to the far, far right. Let's stick with the right. They are feeling so out of everything. They are being displaced, and they know it's true. It's coming. with the Latino demographics changing, with black people rising. They are hysterical. The studies coming out of Denmark now, primarily, are showing with real clarity for the first time that people are not afraid of losing income or their jobs to these people that they're so afraid of. They're afraid of losing social status. And they see themselves being displaced, and they are getting hysterical. Now, this includes the upper echelons of the GOP. They're not as whack crazy as I sort of thought they might be.
Well, this is what I've been telling my audience, okay? This is what I've been saying on the air, and I know you say you haven't been listening for a while, but...
Hit me.
I'm saying the same thing, that, you know, a lot of people want to just say, F them, and they're crazy, and and I'm saying to them, you have to understand how desperate they are in order to be this way, in order to hate their own country in this, you know, with such ferociousness. You know, in order,
I don't know that they hate their own country.
Oh, they
they're
do.
just so afraid.
No, they hate their country. They hate the fact that, you know...
They hate us.
They just hate government. The government has been an extreme disappointment to them, and quite frankly, the government has been controlled by one man, Mitch McConnell, believe it or not.
Yeah, boy, that's the
since
truth.
2009. And I'm trying
God,
to...
I hate that man. I despise that creature.
And I'm telling you right now that the reason he holds up the stimulus package and the reason he's letting them starve in the middle of a pandemic is because he wants to pile on to this resentment. He wants to. He wants them to hate even more their own manner of governance. Now he is the impediment to progress. He is the impediment
to... He is the devil incarnate.
No, I'm serious. Listen to me. He's the impediment to the stimulus package. He's the impediment. They will end up defunding the police. The Republicans will.
That's right.
They won't give the states and the cities money. And
exactly. They're not going to bail the states out.
It's not a bailout. Those states have to balance their budgets, and they take in more from the federal government than they pay in. Okay?
$2.41, Kentucky, for every dollar.
These red states are on permanent government welfare. Okay?
That's right.
And when the government refuses to give them their welfare check, okay, the state has to defund sanitation workers, police officers, public hospitals.
They'll cut everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And that will create even more hatred and resentment, and they think it ameliorates...
They will make it sound as though we are the problem.
Yes. Yes.
They're so good at it. Their messaging is so damn brilliant. Ours is so rotten, you know?
Ours isn't rotten. Ours isn't rotten. It's just that they don't hear us. They're not watching us. They're not listening to us. They don't. People who
I think they're better than we are.
People who need the most help are not watching this. They are not listening to this. Some of them don't even have internet. Some of them don't have broadband. I mean, so they're in a bubble. They're in a bubble with peer pressure everywhere.
There's no reason you would remember, but I go back to Kentucky twice a year for a month each, and I'm telling you, the last time I was back there, the hate against people like us is absolutely visceral.
I know.
You can feel it in the air.
I know.
They look at you like they want to kill you.
I know, and it's so bizarre because we're the people who are advocating for them to be to be remembered. And, you know, the others are just playing into their resentment. So this is what I've been trying to explain to people who just want to, you know, disavow this 35%. I understand. I really do. But if we helped them, if we literally helped them, and they could see a difference in their lives, a real difference in their lives with a Biden presidency and a Democratic Senate and House, we could end it, or at least ameliorate it, at least tamp it down, this hatred.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
This morning, we learned another 853,000 Americans filed new jobless claims last week. That is about the same as the entire population of the state of North Dakota.
That's a 137,000 jump from the week before. We've also got a jump in the number of people continuing to collect benefits here too.
The economic recovery appears to be slowing. Meanwhile, we're still hearing about the possibility of a stimulus package.
And the clock is ticking. The House passed a short-term spending bill to avert a government shutdown and buy them more time to negotiate a stimulus bill.
There are now 3 competing proposals and just 9 days to get something done.
Meanwhile, we're seeing more scenes like this, a seemingly endless line of cars at a holiday food giveaway. This economic pain is for many the result of the health crisis that has killed more than 289,000 Americans and left millions without work. Well, President Trump isn't talking about stimulus talks or even the raging pandemic. Instead,
President Trump meeting with state attorneys general today after several GOP states joined a last-ditch legal effort to overturn President-elect Biden's victory. The president and his supporters continue to make false claims of widespread fraud.
Keep score, everybody. Keep score. I want you to keep score of who is an impediment to progress on any level, on any issue, on anything that you care about. Because frankly, the idea that we have a chance to put the Senate into Democratic hands on January 5th by Georgia's voters should not be overlooked or dismissed or under-supported. Because if we end up with Mitch McConnell as the majority leader yet again, then you will not see a meaningful stimulus package go to the people who need it the most. And I'm telling you that the resentment that we were just talking about, I believe that article, it's an opinion piece by Thomas Edsall. It was in Wednesday's homework. So if you want it, go to randyrhodes.com, click on homework, click on Wednesday's homework, it's in there. But honestly, the idea that they keep on adding and adding and adding resentment to people's minds with regard to the way that they are governed is everything they want to do because they want to overturn the way we govern ourselves. And building resentment in people by depriving them of freedom. I mean, real freedom. Go look at FDR. FDR had the 4 freedoms, and it was freedom of hunger. Right? Freedom from hunger, freedom from want. That's what makes people free. And other countries in the world understand that. In Europe, in Canada, all over the globe, when people were asked to stay home to prevent the spread of COVID, Australia too, okay? And Australia, they're partying now. They have concerts, they have, outdoor events, they have, all kinds of, indoor restaurants. Australia's doing great. But when they were asking their people to stay home and actually asking their people not to travel from one province to another, or in our case, from state to state, in order to beat back COVID, they paid them. They paid them. Everything that they put in place in March and April was beefed up. It didn't have a sunset on it like ours did. Okay? Our relief package ended. It ended. And people are tapped out. And the economy cannot recover unless we get rid of COVID. And it ain't going to happen so fast. I mean, Redfield was on the TV yesterday, and I don't know, hardly anybody, played what he said, but what he said was really sad. It was depressing, but it's true.
Probably for the next 60 to 90 days, we're going to have more deaths per day than we had in 9/11 or we had in Pearl Harbor. And the reality is the vaccine approval this week's not going to really impact that.
It's not going to impact that. You know why? We only have 20 million people that are able to get vaccinated by the end of this year. That's all we have. And that's not enough. We have more healthcare workers than that. We have more seniors than that. I mean, and when you look at the kind of mass casualty incidents, in this country that we've, endured through, mass casualty events, we have surpassed the numbers,
More people died yesterday of COVID than died at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. that died on September 11th, that died in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, that died at Gettysburg.
Oh, God.
I mean, Willie, the numbers are staggering. And again, what happened on September 11th affected the way we looked at the world and conducted foreign policy and are still conducting foreign policy because of those deaths on one day. We've been talking about World War II, the Civil War. More people have died from COVID than died in combat deaths in World War I, World War II, or the Civil War.
Jesus.
It is unbelievable that this president still is not able to focus on this, and that leaders of his personality cult still don't take it as the public health threat that it is.
It's a mass casualty event right up there with Pearl Harbor, right up there with 9/11, right up there with the Battle of Gettysburg. These are mass casualty events, okay? That is what this is. And Mitch McConnell is saying he doesn't see a path to an agreement for a stimulus package. He doesn't see a pathway forward. And so here again you have the Republicans wrecking this deal in the middle of a mass casualty event. The President of the United States of America is throwing paper towels at you in the middle of a mass casualty event, as he is wont to do, as he did in Puerto Rico. And you were cool with it because they were Puerto Ricans. They're not real Americans. They're Puerto Ricans. But when you look the other way, when he throws paper towels at Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and you say nothing, then there's no one to say anything for you when he throws paper towels at you. And that is what they're offering you in the middle of this. I mean, some governors have sent, cloth masks through the mail, okay? And it's a paper towel. That is what they're offering you. I'm telling you, I said this yesterday. Let me reiterate this over and over again. In the middle of the 2008 depression that was caused by the Republicans' deregulation, the party of let the banks do whatever they want to you, okay? It crashed our economy. And we were hemorrhaging 800,000 jobs a month every month. This month, we lost 853,000 jobs. 853,000 jobs. And it isn't even close to being over. We are in the middle of a mass casualty event. The President of the United States wants to talk about himself. And you have these loyalists that only, they're so afraid of Trump supporters' disinformation and misinformation and the sources of their misinformation and disinformation being held to no journalistic standards that we can find whatsoever. And instead of doing something about propaganda in this country, or doing something in this country about if you're going to brand yourself news, then you need to meet basic minimum journalistic standards. You need to fact check yourself. You need to have an ombudsman. You need to be able to prove what you're saying is true over and over and over and over again, right? Instead, you have people like over at Fox News that argue in court that no reasonable person would believe anything that Tucker Carlson says. And that is their defense. That is their defense. No reasonable person would believe any of the fantasy that's spewed on Fox News. Therefore, they're innocent. It's buyer beware. We could do something about this. We could totally fix this.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, or Kizzy Corbett. Kizzy is an African-American scientist who is right at the forefront of the development of the vaccine. So the first thing you might want to say to my African-American brothers and sisters is that the vaccine that you're going to be taking was developed by an African-American woman. And that is just a fact. I mean, that is a fact. And I think that's some of the things that people don't fully appreciate.
So why would Dr. Fauci have to put out an announcement that Kizzmekia Corbett, who was responsible for identifying the strand in the RNA that could build a protein, right, that could produce a reaction, an antibody reaction to this virus, is an African-American scientist? Why? Because people do not trust their own government at this point. People don't trust our government. And that goes on both sides of the aisle. And you know what? If we don't restore some sort of normalcy in our governance, and none of it is normal that's going on now. Nothing is normal. We're in the middle of a mass casualty event. You have the President of the United States threatening Stephen Hahn, Dr. Hahn, the head of the FDA today, telling him he needs to resign this afternoon unless he approves this vaccine under political pressure, right? Which is increasing people's skepticism about putting this thing in their arm, to the point where Fauci has to go on television and say to African Americans who have every reason to be skeptical of their government that the scientist at the National Institutes of Health who worked on this vaccine is an African American scientist. Her name is Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. They call her Kizzy. This is her.
What we know is that this virus is in the same family of viruses like SARS. So it is akin and about 80% genetically similar to the SARS virus. We know now, based on some of the transmission data from China, that not only did the virus jump from an animal reservoir into humans, but there is sustained human-to-human transmission, and that's been documented several times over now, including in a hospital setting with healthcare workers. Every day, we're learning more and more and more. Obviously, because this is a novel virus, and even though we've been to this rodeo before with MERS and SARS, there's still so many unknowns. What an mRNA vaccine is we're essentially delivering the genetic material. So we're delivering the messenger RNA that encodes our mutated novel coronavirus spike. The messenger RNA will tell the body to present this spike protein, and the body will respond by creating an immune response. And hypothetically, if all goes well, then that immune response will then be able to see a novel coronavirus before a person gets infected and prevent that infection.
That's Kizzmekia Corbett from the National Institutes of Health. And it's so sad that we have to actually look at the brilliant woman that we just heard and make a note that she's African American, so that African Americans could have some confidence in the vaccine, because this government has been so disappointing for so long to so many Black and poor white and Hispanic and you name it. And it's because it's been in the hands of the Republican Party, which doesn't even exist anymore. It's now the party of Trumpism, which is a racist, double down. They want another civil war. They literally want another Antietam. They literally want another Gettysburg. They want another civil war. They're interested in it. They think a do-over is what's needed. And they're all about Trump because Trump might bring it about. Well, that's just sick and sad. We have enough death in this country to go around. And by the way, you know what the Attorney General of the United States is doing today? They're trying to get more methods of execution. I swear to God. You know, this is a little factoid for you. No lame duck presidency has ever moved ahead with the execution of Americans during the lame duck period. It doesn't happen. We've been killing people. We've been executing people on death row like a freaking conveyor belt, like the Lucid Candy Factory episode. And Bill Barr wants more methods other than lethal injection to be deployed in the killing of people on death row during a lame duck period. I mean, did they sit in a circle with tissues in the middle watching snuff films? I mean, is there like some sexual fabulousness that they feel when they watch death? They love death. They worship death. They're totally into death. And they're talking their supporters into believing that killing and death and the death of democracy is good for them. It isn't good for you. It's death. It's death. Now, it's 4:26 in the afternoon Eastern Time on a Friday, and I am waiting for the Supreme Court to give their one-line opinion about go jump in the river with this, Greg Abbott, Texas, seditious, conspiracy that he's got going on there with all these freaking Trump supporters. And my best guess is if they're going to do it today, and it's just a guess, but my best guess is if they're going to do it today, they'll do it like a minute before 5 o'clock. Omar in Virginia.
Randy, thank you so much for taking my call. There's one cure that can solve a lot of problems, and that's removing Mitch McConnell. So the DNC need to throw whatever they got into Georgia. I mean, I think Obama needs to go down there. Bernie Sanders needs to go. Everybody needs to go to Georgia.
They will. They definitely will. There's no question they'll go to Georgia. I mean, Trump's going to go back to Georgia. There's no question he's going to go to Georgia again because, Mitch McConnell's going to make him go to Georgia because Mitch McConnell is only interested in one thing, and that's Mitch McConnell, and he's and power, period. End of story.
Yep.
So,
But yeah, absolutely. But real quick, regarding the Attorney General of Texas, one, I mean, can he be impeached? I mean, does the Texas State House do anything? I mean,
they're Republican. The whole legislature is. They're never going to impeach. The idea that you have an attorney general who's been under indictment for 5 years, who we know defunded his own prosecution, whose wife is a sitting senator who introduced legislation that would make the thing he's under indictment for legal. I mean, it's such a corrupt place. This is so unbelievable. And they keep on voting against their own best interests, which is law and order. They spew this at me. And I sit here with my big brain knowing how corrupt they are.
Yeah. And I really think that they engage in a lot of voter oppression because all the polls prior to the election showed Texas blue.
Well, there was a lot of voter suppression. And you know how you know? When you see 10-hour lines or one drop box for over 1 million people, that's how you know.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. The president is trying to overturn the election he lost. He did it out loud at a vaccine event yesterday, which gives you a sense of his priorities.
We won in those swing states.
But he appears to have lost one potential ally that he was counting on.
The United States Supreme Court spent a hot minute looking at a Trump case to try to throw out the election results in Pennsylvania, and then just said no unanimously in a one-sentence order. They were not taking this thing up.
The Supreme Court now has a 6-3 conservative majority.
And all 6 conservatives said no way, including 3 justices who Trump himself appointed. So that's a pretty harsh rebuke.
Now we will watch this other last-second lawsuit from Republicans in Texas.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filing a suit against 4 states, asking the Supreme Court to declare election certifications in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin unconstitutional.
But so far, the Supreme Court has been very clear here. It does not want to get involved.
Oh! Wonder how he's going to take it, when they decide that they don't want to overturn the will of the people. In a constitutional republic, they may not be willing to go that far for him. We'll see. Ed in the Bronx.
Yes, hi, Randy. Love your show. I watch you every day.
Thank you.
The question I have is, will anyone ever investigate how Mitch McConnell managed to win his seat again?
Well, that's what I think
with
that
18% approval rating.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to go play, conspiracy games in the court, you're driving me crazy. You're supposed to turn the volume down because it's a slight delay, so that if you would, tell me I'm a effing whatever, I could dump you. So that's the reason to turn it down. But that's what I was saying earlier. Why don't we counterclaim? Why don't we file a counterclaim? Why doesn't Michigan, Dana Nessel, she's a great attorney general, right? Why doesn't she file a counterclaim with the Supreme Court and say, if we're going to play this game where Texas says they don't like the way Michigan's, legislature chose the electors, they didn't like the manner in which we selected, which is popular vote, then let's do a counterclaim and say, we don't like the way Mitch McConnell was elected in Kentucky. We don't like the way Lindsey Graham was elected in South Carolina. In fact, we don't like a lot of the gerrymandering. We don't like the voter suppression we saw in Georgia, because there were 11-hour lines in Georgia for early voting. Remember that? Does anybody remember that? 11 freaking hours. That right there, that's voter suppression. There is no reason in the 21st century, in the middle of a pandemic, no less, that anybody should be waiting 11 hours for anything, let alone to cast a ballot. So, yeah, you want to play these, these games? Let's play. That's what I said. Let's play. Patrick in L.A.
Randy, hey, love your stuff as always. And fantastic point there regarding, how it is that Republicans are running elections, which goes to the point of what you were talking about earlier with the scientists, the black scientists. The point was that, black people don't trust government. Well, everybody needs to be qualifying that it's not government, it's conservative government.
Yes, it is.
Conservative government will always let you down. Conservative government will defund you. It will deregulate you. It will impoverish you. It will, allow for companies to run roughshod over you, to take your money, to poison you, to
redistribute your taxpayer dollars, not to your community, but to the wealthy, over and over and over and over. Deregulate big business and regulate you out of business. They are the Confederacy. They've never stopped being the Confederacy. That is who they are. They learned all this stuff with jelly beans and putting barriers up to vote and, white only and black only. They've never changed. Not once have they ever even tried to understand.
At least since the Civil War, and after that they abandoned their effort to have anything to do with black. Right, yeah. They've abandoned it since then, and but I mean, all your listeners need to respond. It's not government; it's conservative government.
But here's the message. Okay, this is really the message. This is what I say to poor whites, or to people who are losing their businesses because of this pandemic, or people who are just living in Rust Belt towns that never ever redeveloped. Okay, didn't reconstruct when industry changed, okay, which is what Biden is talking about. Reconstruction, right? He's talking about building broadband for people who don't have it, and believe it or not, in this country, too many don't have it. He's also talking about, setting up green energy industries in Rust Belt towns to bring back really good paying jobs, okay? These people will be there to defund infrastructure investment. They exist to do that. They exist to be a barrier between the poor whites in this country who need reconstruction and blacks in this country who need reconstruction and never got it. And here is the conclusion. We are all black now.
Precisely. Yeah, and blacks have felt the majority of this, but in the end,
the grace in which they carry their burden is something to be admired, and we need to actually develop grace and say, oh my God, enough of this. Let's move forward. Let's have some progress here. The Republicans have had control over our lives for almost 20 years now. It has to end. Let's try a different way. Let's try.
And additionally, though,
our representatives need to be responding
That's what I'm saying. Ever since Newt Gingrich and the freaking ridiculous Republican Revolution, everybody has suffered. Everybody who is not uber rich or very well connected to government or can afford a lobbyist. We've all been screwed. They have come and they have tried to dismantle our collective bargaining agreements. They have tried to, disenfranchise us. They have gerrymandered us into insignificance in our own backyards. You want freedom? I'm promising you maximum freedom. Maximum. But that only comes with economic freedom. That only comes with freedom from disease. That only comes with freedom to actually be able to make a living in this world. And as long as you keep voting for the people that are watching those factories sit there boarded up year after year after year after year after year after year after year, doing nothing, building nothing, creating nothing, in southern Ohio, in northern Kentucky, in central Illinois, nothing. All Donald Trump did was lie. Oh, they're bringing the factories, they closed Lordstown. Try a new way. Try the maximum freedom way. Try the way that actually invests in you, that puts money in your pocket, that puts money into your small business, that creates a tax regime that actually celebrates. They talk about freedom to try. Celebrate the freedom to try. Celebrate the freedom to open up a business.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
I don't usually have to fact-check court briefs. They may make dubious legal arguments, but they don't usually just make up a bunch of facts. This Trump brief does that. It's filled with total nonsense. It's kind of like a lawyer took Trump's Twitter feed and polished it up into legal language. So let me go through some of the claims in this brief. Number one, the brief notes that Trump won both Florida and Ohio. True, sure. And then it says no candidate in history, Republican or Democrat, has ever lost the election after winning both states. That's just wrong. Richard Nixon won Florida and Ohio in 1960, but lost the election to Kennedy. Also, even if that claim was right, who cares? That would be an interesting fact, not evidence of fraud in 2020. Number two, Brooke, the brief claims that in Wisconsin, all of the largest cities used unsecured absentee ballot drop boxes. Nope. Again, that's totally wrong. They were not unsecured. They were bolted to the ground. They were built with durable materials. They were designed to be tamper-proof. And many of them, including in big cities, Milwaukee and Green Bay, were monitored 24 hours a day with video surveillance. Number three, the brief also generally claims that leaving ballot boxes in parking lots invites fraud. We'll talk to election experts around the country. They'll tell you there is no evidence of any significant fraud involving these drop boxes in parking lots outside Wisconsin as well. They're secured in various ways, bolted, videotape, tamper-proof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and drop boxes have been used for years. Number four, the brief invokes a statement Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made about the election in Belarus. Pompeo said the prohibition of local independent observers at polling stations is one reason the Belarus election wasn't free and fair. Well, yes, that was a bad election, but that statement doesn't have any relevance to this United States election. There's no evidence independent observers here were banned. Trump claim after claim about Republican poll watchers being banned has been debunked. Number five.
Do you need to take a breath? Need to take a sip of water, Daniel? You good?
I've breathed.
You good?
Okay, we got a few more. Number five. Number five. The brief alleged that Pennsylvania's Secretary of State was in, it said, direct violation of state law by issuing guidance telling counties not to try to match signatures from absentee voters to signatures on file. Look, the Supreme Court, not me, is the boss of what's legal and not, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled 7-0 that nothing in state law requires the signature matching, and a Trump-appointed federal judge ruled exactly the same thing. Number six, the brief alleged that Michigan's Secretary of State broke the law by sending an absentee ballot application to all registered voters there. Again, I'm not in charge of deciding what's legal and not, but there's really no apparent basis for this claim. Absentee ballot application forms are available online. Anyone in Michigan,
anybody,
a nonprofit, a campaign, Joe Schmo, can print them off and mail them to people. When Trump was actually asked in May what he thinks is illegal about what Michigan did, he wouldn't offer a specific answer. And finally, Brooke, I promise I'm almost done. Number 7, Thank you. The brief pointedly notes that Trump won 18 of 19 so-called bellwether counties identified by the Wall Street Journal, places that voted for the presidential winner in every election from 1980 through 2016. Well, the verdict on this one is true. Yay. But again, who cares? Right. As demographic change, as politics change, preferences change, bellwether counties can cease to be bellwethers for all sorts of entirely boring reasons. So this data point is an interesting thing for pundits to talk about, but it doesn't say anything about whether this election was free and fair. And Brooke, as we know, this election was indeed free and fair.
Do you want to say that again, Daniel?
I don't. I'm done.
Daniel Dale. He's amazing. But every point in the legal brief to the Supreme Court was false. Every single one, except for the 18 and the 19 bellwether counties. Every single thing was a lie. And the idea that people believe these lies should not be lost on anybody in this audience, because what we have here is a propaganda machine that churns out so much misinformation, disinformation, outright lies and falsehoods that America is literally being bamboozled into believing that they must overthrow their own government. That is the message. That is what is so crazy and creepy and seditious and ugly about this presidency and the people that support it. The elected officials who took an oath to uphold and protect and defend the Constitution, who refused to do so, they need to be sanctioned. They need to not be seated in the 117th Congress, especially if they think that the election in which they just won was a fraudulent election. How could they possibly take their seat? How? The most important thing that everybody in this country needs to hear, should be hearing, should be understanding, should be working towards together, is the freedom, an agenda of maximum freedom. That can only be achieved through economic freedom. That can only be achieved with freedom from want. And what does that mean? That means that every American should have adequate health care, should have food, should have clothing, should have housing and medical care and social services when they need them, the right to not be afraid of disease, the right to not be afraid of unemployment and disability and old age. And until and unless we actually get our brains wrapped around that fact, the resentment in this country is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until people believe what autocrats across the world believe, that democracy doesn't work. It does, but not with this party. This party is corrupt to the core. It is self-dealing. It is self-serving. It gerrymanders to keep power. It suppresses voters to keep power. It does every single thing you could think of to keep power. And that is anathema to the American way of life. It's actually poison. It's poisonous. You know, I put something in the homework today. It's an opinion piece, but it's so well done. It's by Dana Milbank. Okay, and Dana Milbank, decided to write Donald Trump's farewell address based on Donald Trump's own tweets. I'll tweet it out so that you can read it, so that you know which one it is. But it's hysterical, but it's sad. It's really sad, because if you just put Donald Trump's tweets down on paper over the last few days and let it suffice as his farewell address, the last thing he will be saying, kicking and screaming, the brat that he is, the autocrat that he is, the demagogue that he is it was rigged, it was unfair, it was while we're absorbing 3,300 deaths a day every day in this country, while we're seeing 200,000 new cases a day every day in this country, while over 107,000 people are in the hospital literally suffering, if not dying, from a mass casualty event that he refused and refuses still to this minute to address. It's really sad. We should never have gotten this far. But you know what? We did, and you should learn from it. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. We don't need to have a Rust Belt in this country. Steve in Arizona.
Hey, Randy. I want to talk about an intervention, but I agree with you 100%. These 120-something Congress people or House representatives should not be seated. No
126
way.
of them now. That's 64% of all serving Republicans.
It is outrageous.
It is.
If I got to ask you this question, let's say you have an employee and you hired them and they did absolutely nothing for 12 years. What would you do with them?
Right.
I'm sure you'd get rid of them. And I submit to you, we have Mitch McConnell in Kentucky who has done absolutely nothing for our country. 12 years he has not brought anything to the floor other than tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation for business. And he has done absolutely nothing. And I think he should be brought up on charges of sedition. And I don't care if there's some protection or not, supposed protection or an opinion wrote like you can't prosecute a sitting president. That's an opinion. Well, not a law.
That has nothing to do with a senator, number one. Number two, he hasn't committed a crime that I'm aware of. But the idea that this man sees no path to an agreement for stimulus in the middle of a mass casualty event after the election, and a record number of people are sitting in miles-long lines for food. And he won his election with 18% approval? I don't know.
Yeah, I was really hoping Amy could take care of that. Amy McGrath.
What we can do is make him a minority leader and defang him like he's a snake. That's the wrong reptile. He's a big old fat slow turtle is what he is. And you know what he's holding up your stimulus money for, your unemployment benefits for, money for police officers in public hospitals? For liability protection for big business.
Clear for takeoff. The Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
Welcome to Code Whack, your podcast on America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazzar. What are the prospects for Medicare for All for the country and for state-based efforts under a Biden presidency? Who better to ask than Michael Leidy, who's organized, advocated, and developed policy for single-payer Medicare for All nationally and in California for nearly 3 decades. He's a founding fellow of the Sanders Institute, and most recently, he was the Healthcare Constituency Director for Bernie 2020. Welcome to Code Whack, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. It's great to be back.
Wanted to ask you about Joe Biden. What does Joe Biden's presidential election mean for the national Medicare for All movement?
I guess I would be a little bit on the optimist side. I mean, he did kind of make a point, particularly in the last month of the election, saying he didn't support Medicare for All. So we can't be naive about where his stance lies. But on the other hand, if you look at the pandemic, they want to do something immediately to give people health care. The Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act embodies key principles of Medicare for All, covering everybody, no out-of-pocket expenses, filling the gaps, where people are uninsured, like in Medicaid expansion. So I think in the context of that discussion, the Guarantee Act looks very attractive. Secondly, this is an administration that will feel compelled to allow states to set up single-payer systems through the provision of 1332 of the Affordable Care Act, which grants the federal government the ability to provide waivers for states to do universal health care. So robust applications like from California and New York for those waivers would very likely succeed. So a lot of the efforts go to the state level. And then finally, under the Unity Task Force that was established between the Sanders and Biden campaigns, they came up with a very robust version of a public option. It is put everyone who earns under $54,000 into Medicare, focused on the states that didn't expand Medicaid. And you would do that on, again, a basis of no out-of-pocket expenses for those families of four. So you look at that terrain and you say, okay, we're not going to make a leap forward. I guess he's not prepared to sign, H.R. 1384. But you do have openings that are consistent with a publicly administered, publicly financed system. And of course, you have the agitational value of saying what you're going to do is leave 10 million people uncovered. You're going to spend all this money subsidizing the profits of a rapacious and denial-based